Welcome to Red and Blue. I am Major Garrett in Washington. Tonight we bring you a special edition focused on our democracy, specifically how we cast and count ballots. All available evidence, from recounts to audits to court proceedings, show the 2020 election results remain valid. Despite this, a fair number of Americans, almost all aligned with former President Trump, deny or doubt these facts. Last week, I traveled to Phoenix to take part in a discussion about elections and their integrity. It was led by longtime political consultant and focus group moderator Frank Luntz. Our hosts: the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication at Arizona State University, the Annenberg School of Communication and Journalism at the University of Southern California, and Arizona PBS. With me on stage, the co-author of my recent book, The Big Truth, David Becker, who is the executive director and founder of the Nonpartisan Center for Election Innovation and Research. You will also see Georgia's Republican Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, and Bill Gates, a Republican member of the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors, the governing body for Arizona's most populous county. In the room were ASU students and a focus group of voters who doubt our election procedures.
I want a word or phrase from each one of you to describe the election process in America today.
Messed up.
It's not who votes that counts, it's who counts the votes.
Polarized.
Fraudulent.
Not kosher.
Rigged.
Questionable.
Seems like technology has made it more complicated than made it easier.
Soros, our Democrat-owned.
Questionable.
Dysfunctional.
Scandalous.
Like any process, needs improvement.
Untrustworthy.
Correct.
I'm actually going to go to you guys. We weren't planning to do this quickly. This is a problem.
Sure. I want to hear what your perspective is. Because I've put together a book with my co-author David Becker, quite separate from the result of the 2020 election. We believe the 2020 election was an American success story, not the result, but what we did. 20 more million Americans voted in 2020 than did in 2016. It was the most diverse electorate our country's ever seen. More people participated than ever before, under very difficult circumstances, with a real deadly threat out there. And we achieved something that we feel is not only defensible in terms of the specifics that Brad Raffensperger and Bill Gates mentioned, but that a lot of people got involved. We trained 400,000 new poll workers in our country to do that election. We trained most of them on Zoom. That's a hard thing to do.
So, David?
And we feel there's a disconnect between you and us, and I want to hear what your perspective is.
Who thinks that Trump won in 2020? Why?
Well, listening to you, my first thought was we had ballot harvesting. We have video of people being sent home and suitcases being brought out from underneath tables. Where's the truth? We don't, you say it was a correct election, but who voted?
Why do you think Trump won?
Same sentiment he's explaining right now is, at the end of the day, we have all this technology and it takes weeks to get results in. You have cameras being shut off and then all of a sudden a spike in votes come up. I mean, it shouldn't be that complicated.
Why do you think Trump won?
Because Trump wasn't supposed to win in 2016. And I believe it was, if I'm not mistaken, it was Maxine Waters who said on the day he won that the impeachment of Trump starts now. And they tried everything they could to get him out. They tried the Russian hoax, they tried the Ukraine impeachment, and then ultimately what ended up succeeding was the virus. So they tried everything to get the man out that was never supposed to be there in the first place.
One more. Why do you think Trump won?
Suppression of information, hiding the Hunter Biden story, all of the algorithms when people did searches, the money that Mark Zuckerberg poured into the social media platforms, just fooling around with technology.
Okay. David?
I'm David Becker. I have been working in voting and elections for about 25 years. I worked for several years in the Clinton Justice Department in the voting rights section, and then I worked for twice as many years in the George W. Bush Justice Department. I now run a nonprofit in Washington, D.C. It's a nonpartisan nonprofit that works with election officials like these two gentlemen, Republicans and Democrats all across the country, to help them produce and facilitate elections that voters should trust and do trust. One of the things that led us to write this book is we've seen people across the political spectrum, quite frankly, who in an evenly divided country seem to believe that it's really difficult for their candidate to lose. This is not uniquely on one side of the spectrum or the other. And that's obviously a real problem in democracy. In democracy and elections, there are going to be winners and losers. That's the point of an election, is that someone gets to govern and someone lives to fight another day. But we're losing that to some degree in our democracy. All we can tell you is the facts that we know, that we have researched, that I've devoted my entire life learning from people like Mr. Gates and Mr. Raffensperger and election officials all across the country, that our election system actually, the reality is that it's more secure than it's ever been. We have moved towards more paper. All of the ballots in the battleground states are now paper. We have moved to more audits. All of the states audit that paper. We have moved to more court scrutiny of the pre-election process, and we moved to more post-election scrutiny. We have more bipartisan, transparent review of this than ever before. And someone made a very good point that it needs improvement. It always needs improvement. That's 100% correct. That could not be better.
You're nodding your head. Why?
It feels like you're selling me, and I don't buy it, because
You agree with that?
everyone knows that it's pretty common knowledge now that the CIA has been doing nation building all across the planet, and they wrote software to jimmy elections. We have elections now that are tabulated electronically. And those machines are not supposed to have modems in them. Well, no computer has a modem in it anymore. It's on the motherboard. Those machines, our machines, could have been connected to the internet. And in fact, I believe they were connected to the internet. And that technology is the thing that is the problem.
I want to give everyone a chance. Go ahead.
Well, one of the things I would ask, having done research, you know that you have to say what the error rate is. There is no system that you should be 100% confident in. And so I want to know, okay, if there are issues in any process, what is the error rate? And how can you improve it? Every single election. I want to know, what did you find? What did you do to change it? And let's keep improving our whole process so that we build confidence. We're not building confidence.
After the break, the conversation takes a hard look at voting and technology. You are streaming Red and Blue, reporting across the political divide. Welcome back to Red and Blue. I'm Major Garrett. This discussion on election integrity was designed to elicit questions and provide facts, and then see where that exchange of information would lead. As you will see, it was a lively process.
When I took office I was elected in the 2018 cycle. We had the old DRE electronic machines without a paper ballot. So what we then had, the first bill was House Bill 316 in Georgia. It gave us a verifiable paper ballot. We needed funding to do that. We put it out to bids, and we had to use a company that was approved, had been certified by the United States Election Assistance Commission. So you and I can't make these machines tomorrow. We have to go through a testing process. So we went through that and we got new machines. We also outlawed ballot harvesting, and we copied word for word Arizona law, because at that time when we put that in there, you were actually coming before the Supreme Court and you did win. And so ballot harvesting is illegal in Georgia, illegal in Arizona, Florida, and many other states. We agree with you on that. We also then could have a verifiable paper ballot. When we rolled into the 2020 cycle, the one thing that we did see, historically, we only have 5 to 6% absentee voting. But in 2020, we had about 30%. And I think right now you're still 30% in Arizona just because that's how people like to vote here. But when we had the presidential race, it was so close, it was within 12,000 votes. We then counted all 5 million ballots by hand. We verified that the machines counted accurately and that the original count was what the original count was.
And I'm opening this up to anyone who's in the room right now. So if you want to be heard, in addition to our focus group participants, raise your hand, I'll give you the mic, and we'll go right here.
Why do Democrats think that Republicans are cheating all the time, and Republicans think that Democrats are cheating all the time? Does anyone believe that a Republican, a very staunch Republican, can actually just say that this Democrat was honest and fair and did the right thing, and vice versa? I just question where that comes from.
Go ahead.
Who loses when both sides cheat? We do. The people lose.
But so can you tell me an instance in your mind when you think a Republican cheated to win?
Say again, sir?
Can you give me an instance that's in your mind of when you remember or think a Republican cheated to win?
You know, I can't, but
okay.
I was apolitical. I hated the stuff. And then I started paying attention just a couple of cycles ago. And now I've gone down the rabbit hole, and it scares me.
Okay.
Something that I would add is my board and I were 4 of 5 Republicans. So again, if people think that the election was stolen and rigged here in Maricopa County, it was done by 4 of 5 Republicans. So this is important to understand. Secondly, you talked about in 2022 the issues that we had with the tabulators, and we're sorry for that. That was a mistake, and we are going to work on it to make sure. We actually have the former Chief Justice doing an investigation right now to make sure that doesn't happen again. But it wasn't just in Republican areas. And it's important to understand, too, even if those votes were not tabulated there on site, everyone could put their votes into box 3, and everyone who wanted to vote on election day, their votes counted.
Okay, this is...
So we're told.
Do you believe him?
No, not believe for a second.
Why not?
We don't believe that somebody that sat in their basement had the greatest number of votes of any president of the United States either. It's just...
And he talks about 2022, but if everything was working the night before and then it doesn't work on election day, well, who votes the most on election day? Is Republicans. So when I woke up and heard
the issues, Republican. Why was it that you know, when they do the overlay, it was majority of Republican areas that had all the issues?
It actually wasn't.
When we were going to do...
You've been told that.
So I have 2 points I want to make, and it really goes back to something you were saying when you were telling us, basically, don't be sore losers, you lost, and I'm sorry you're disappointed. Did Hillary Clinton get that same, speech? I know you weren't speaking with her, but I'm going to say probably not. I think there were 3 years of investigation.
I said in the immediate aftermath of the November 2016 election that Hillary Clinton lost and Donald Trump won by the rules that were set ahead of time, which they had, and that is 100% right. There's still now 6+ years after that, there's still not a shred of evidence that Donald Trump did not legitimately win the 2016 election. I said it at the time, I will still say it today.
That's good that you admit it, but I think she's still wondering whether it was a rigged election against her as well. So to your question, there apparently are Democrats who are concerned about election integrity. The other thing, in regard, this is not a youthful group, no offense, but
Same up here.
Many years.
Either, obviously.
Okay, the many years that we've all been voting, doesn't it seem like in the last 2 or in the last 4 years, it seems like it takes not till 10 o'clock, not till midnight, but weeks? Yeah. So here's our technology doing us so greatly. Do you remember waiting 2 weeks for an election result? Or even until, 6 in the morning, maybe, when few things were coming, we knew how many votes were out. We knew how many people showed up that day.
The challenge that you have with absentee voting, which we saw in 2020, is we went from 5% to 30%, 35%, is that in the June primaries that we had, the counties were not doing any, looking at the absentee ballots, doing any pre-scanning before Election Day, so it took forever. So in November of 2020, we told the counties that they were supposed to do pre-scanning. Some of the counties didn't, i.e. Fulton County, our largest county. So we were waiting for several days because they had all these ballots, absentee ballots that they had received. Then they had to look at them. They had to verify the signature. Then they had to go ahead and separate the envelopes, lay the ballots down flat. It just is a process then because our numbers were so high. Now, unfortunately, some political campaigns are saying, don't bring your ballots in until election day. Well, that defeats the whole process of doing early scanning. You can't get ahead of the thing. And so it's really hurting the process because if people don't get the results quickly, there is lack of trust. People start thinking, what happened?
Bring Major in, and I'm going to ask you.
Sure.
And we got a clock so we can see it.
Yeah.
2 minutes. In 2 minutes, convince them.
No. Of what?
That just maybe 2020 was accurate.
Well, let me address your question about results, because the media is a part of that conversation. The media calls elections, right? Elections aren't certified for days and days and days after Election Day. That's always been true in America. What you're waiting for, what you're anticipating, is the media call of the election. Close elections take longer to accurately tabulate, and they take longer to come up with a sense of what votes are outstanding, where are they outstanding, what are the historical patterns of that voting, so you can make a call in an election. One other thing that is complicating in all of our elections since 2016, so 2018, 2020, and 2022, all three of those elections set near records or new records for turnout. 2018 was the highest turnout in a midterm election in 100 years. 2020 was the highest ever. 2022 was nearly as high as 2018. What does higher turnout mean? It means more voters from more unexpected places and a more hard to read electorate. That also slows things down in terms of the media calling elections, okay? So part of the interlocking thing you're waiting for on election night, tell me who won. We're actually holding back and trying to be more careful, acknowledging not only differences in polling that preceded the election, but where the votes are actually coming in, and higher turnout in these last three elections for sure gave us more volatility in those numbers. So that's one factor to the way you're consuming information on election night about elections.
Isn't that a good thing?
On election night.
Isn't that a good thing?
No, it's not.
So he's talking about making sure they get it right.
Yeah, but
And you want them to
Fox
rush.
News called the election for Biden with less than 1% of the Arizona vote counted. I'm sorry, you cannot make that call.
So I've heard everybody hit this topic a couple of times and skim right over it. You just said it, you just said it, you just said it. My biggest problem is the last time I saw an election that I actually thought was going well was when I was a young Marine and I was sitting overseas and I got my mail-in ballot. They gave it to me, I sent it in a couple of weeks ahead of time. They finally got it, they counted it, I'm pretty sure anyway. And now I've watched, we go to all these absentee ballots. We've got, you said 30% of the population, 30%?
85.
85. This is ridiculous.
85 mail-in.
It should not be that way. I mean, we can talk the technology issues, flipping a vote here, flipping a vote there. At the end of the day, we can only trust what our technological experts tell us. But I think it goes further down than that. We can't trust this mail-in ballot stuff.
What's important to understand is with 85% of ballots being mail-in, it does take longer than it used to 30 or 40 years ago, but it was 13 days in 2022, and we've been running in that 10 to 13 days for the past few decades. It's just like Major said, we didn't pay attention to this before because the races weren't so close. We have close races here in Arizona, and please don't forget, for those of you who have these concerns, Republican and Democrat in the room, they're watching everything, and we have a 24/7 live stream camera. And if you guys have questions, come down, come volunteer. We want you to learn more about it, and if you see things that need to be fixed, we want you to help us fix them. So this is your process.
Across our country, election officials administer elections. Both parties watch this process play out in precincts across the country, and the media report the results. When we come back, a discussion about this intersection. You're streaming Red and Blue. Welcome back to Red and Blue. I'm Major Garrett. Our elections are decentralized. States have different rules. Local jurisdictions supervise the process. Voters, young and old, participate. And as you will see, the college students had questions for election doubters.
Hello. So, to this gentleman at the end here, please correct me if I'm wrong. You were saying that you don't necessarily trust mail-in ballots, and I think that somewhere that's kind of the sentiment for all of you. I wonder, when did that start, considering that Arizona has the longest history of mail-in ballots, and this is kind of the first time election integrity started? And to that point, how are people to vote when, I don't know, another pandemic happens, if heaven forbid it does, when you can't really go out without being sick? I wonder how you would trust an election at that point.
With mail-in balloting, I think where the majority of the distrust comes is that if I want to request a mail-in ballot, I'm a U.S. citizen, I'm a legal resident of Arizona, I am 100% rightfully allowed to vote. But I should be able to request and receive a mail-in ballot. And if I choose to, and if I want to vote that way, that is my right as an American citizen to vote. Where everything's coming into question is that we're sending mail-in ballots to every single person on the voter roll, and that's even what we know about.
But that's not accurate. It's people that are requesting to go on that voter roll and the permanent voter list, and when they get it, they have to sign it, right? For those of you who do mail-in, you sign it, and back at our election tabulation center, we compare those signatures. And if the signature that you have on your name at your address doesn't match what we have on our rolls, we don't count that vote. And we will even call up people to see if there was a mistake or something, and they have the opportunity to cure. I'm against ballot harvesting, but the reality is that even if people are doing the ballot harvesting, these votes don't count unless the signature on that envelope matches the signature that we have in our system. That's how we verify that 85% of the vote.
Hold on. I want to ask you guys a question. This group here. How many of you think Kerry Lake was elected governor?
Yeah. Oh, I think they have their
And I
shit
worked
together.
the
It's
election.
just-
It does.
What? It's just what, ma'am?
The same problems repeat between election cycles, because there were some similarities last time to this time.
Go ahead.
How do you elect somebody that won't even do a debate with the other candidate?
That's not the question. The question is who won.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, I think she won because if you look at all of the debates that they tried to get together, and she wouldn't debate her.
But debates don't matter. The debate's not the election. What are you doing so that this doubt, and it's real, as you can tell, and it's thoughtful, whether or not you agree or disagree with it, this is your responsibility. What are you doing to address this?
Yes, and so the way that we have addressed this, and I know some of you may not agree with this, but to run the most transparent elections that have ever been run in our state, we're opening the doors to folks. We have put out information in advance, dealing with things that have been debunked. And if you do one thing for me, please go to justthefacts.vote. Tonight or at some other point, you'll see a lot of these things. We don't have time to go through all of the ways that we've debunked it. Justthefacts.vote. Please go there, and when you read it and you have more questions, call me or come down. We'll walk you through. I want you all to understand, we care about you. Every one of my colleagues on the Board of Supervisors, we could be doing other things, but we've chosen public service because we think it's a noble profession. And if you guys think that it doesn't hurt my heart to hear this tonight, it does. We want to convince you guys. We want to give you faith in this.
So I wanted to bring up backtracking just a little bit because I find this fascinating. So, and think about this question as I say it. Maybe picture me your age. See how that's different. So those of you who said, I don't trust politicians because they're trying to tell me what I want to hear, that kind of stuff. So then why do you care so deeply about what goes on with the elections and ballots if you're not going to trust who's elected in office anyway? Now, think about that and imagine me your own age. Imagine how your answer's different.
Don't Don't look at what they say, look at what they do. You have to look at the record. I canvassed for Andy Biggs, and I've talked to Andy Biggs a number of times, and we don't agree on everything, but I watch what he does in Congress, and I'll continue to vote for him because what he does in Congress I agree with. I think he's a good congressman.
Some election denialism arises from a feeling that former President Trump got a raw deal. Other sentiments are based in doubt about mail-in balloting, even in places like Arizona, where that form of voting has been prevalent for decades. More on these fault lines when we return. You're streaming Red and Blue. Welcome back to Red and Blue. I'm Major Garrett. There are times when uncertainty about election results are more of a feeling than a specific accusation about fraud or a questionable activity. But those feelings matter because they feed distrust and create a sense of alienation. One goal of last Monday's conversation was to bridge differences and give doubters a chance to be heard.
I heard what you said about Representative Biggs. Do you believe he was legitimately elected in 2020 and 2022 on those same paper ballots? Do you believe he has authority to serve in Congress?
I actually asked him the same question.
What do you believe?
Yeah,
You know, I believe I don't trust any of the process where there was any electronic counting. I don't believe any of it.
So you're not sure if he's legitimately elected to Congress?
I'm not sure.
You're not, okay.
And I guess one
Fair
of the
enough.
questions, follow-up questions I have is, because I really appreciate the skepticism in the room, who benefits when we don't believe that anybody has the authority that might be conferred by a legitimate election? But who benefits?
We all lose.
We all lose.
But who benefits? Who's the force behind this? Well, I mean, we just identified, Representative Biggs has concerns about 2020, 22. Well, but about the presidential race on those same paper ballots.
What we're getting at is if I've heard some of the skeptics here say there's like a power structure or somebody who's getting something out of this, if we all lose, who benefits if we don't believe in our elections?
So this is how I see this whole thing. When we have this much division between us, the people who are in power tend to stay in power because I'm voting for my guy.
What I want to hear from both sides, the panel up here of these four gentlemen, and one of you, just one from each. What do you advise that we do as the next generation as voters to avoid this mistrust in elections? Because I think it's great that stuff has happened, and I think it's great that we're having this conversation, but this is the past, and I know that you're doing it for us. I appreciate it. I know that you guys are stirring the pot because what happens now will bleed into what is going to happen 50 years from now, and I appreciate you guys doing that. But what do you advise we do right now that we can do?
I have 3 daughters right now. Your age, you look like one of them, for crying out loud. And we discuss issues all the time. Family, that's the great thing about family. They come home, we discuss things, what they've learned at school, what's happening all the time. So it's been wonderful, and I've learned much from it myself. But teaching them too is part of it, because there's lots of things that you guys learn. My one point to you would be just test everything. Test it. And then look at the fruits of what it is, particularly the people. We're hearing up here, I mean, to me, you guys, you're telling me how perfect the election systems that you've overseen here are. I mean, we've talked about ballot harvesting and such being a problem, and being in the media too. It has its own issues that, I mean, where do you get your news? Where do you get your news? Those are my points. They get thrown at us very often, but you guys have to self-reflect on that too. And that's kind of also what I tell my children often too. Reflect on what you're asking.
So what I would say is listen to everyone's perspective. Even if there's perspectives that you say, there's no way, I don't buy that. Listen to them, engage in the conversation, stay involved, get educated, look at multiple sources, and encourage your peers to vote and get involved. That's how you can change the system.
I'm going to just say the irony of both the things you gentlemen said is it was very similar. And I think that was a very eye-opening thing for me right now. Even though it might be opposing sides or whatever, it just seems like we really are looking at the same things here. So that's a reassuring thing for me as a young person to see.
Suspicion about election results, of course, occurs in a context of political polarization. When we come back, how one influences the other. You're streaming Red and Blue. Welcome back to Red and Blue. I'm Major Garrett. In this conversation, one ASU student raised a metaphor: sports teams and politics. That took the discussion in a different direction, about possible remedies and sportsmanship.
All right, so once again, thank you guys so much for being here. I'm from a deep red state, from Missouri. It's been a pretty great day for me.
Congratulations.
Thank you, thank you. After an election doesn't go your way, if you're a Democrat or a Republican, how do you guys think we should move forward the next day to then get back in the workforce as Americans together in the community to get past the election and then become friends again?
Well, I do think the sportsmanship metaphor is quite useful in this broader conversation. I'm a San Diego Padres fan, so I've suffered a lot in my life when it comes to sports.
Deservedly so.
But there's a phrase in sports: you can hate the player, but not the game. You know, to the questioner's point, at the end of the game, what are we watching after every NFL game, but especially a high-profile one like the Super Bowl? We watch to see the coaches come to the middle of the field and shake hands, and the quarterbacks and all the other players. And I do think sportsmanship and the idea of, we all know what the rules are, there'll be interpretations of those rules. Some of those interpretations of the rules may come our way, some may go the other way. We will work as hard as we can to achieve the result we want, but when it's over, that concept, and I'm not saying it's universal or applies perfectly, but I do think it is a helpful metaphorical construct when we think about civility in politics.
Because I'm a huge sports fan. I'm from Seattle. I love my Seahawks, but that doesn't mean that it is the same as politics. Because
I'm not saying it's the same. I'm saying it's a helpful
football
metaphor.
Coach didn't send, isn't the mayor that sent SWAT teams to shut down churches and schools during this pandemic. And then they expect they're supposed to be like, oh, come together and we're all in this together. I hate all this wordplay that came from the pandemic. We're not all in this together, because I would never have shut down a church in the middle of a pandemic, let alone the school. To me, like, those should have stayed open. So to me, that's just insane to compare it to sports, because there's not as much on the line, I mean, these were people's families and businesses that were destroyed.
I want to ask you guys, I'm curious, and this is a real question. Did you think it was appropriate for Donald Trump to do something that no other president has done? He didn't show up to see his successor inaugurated.
No.
Was that appropriate?
No.
What would you tell him?
Because it goes along the lines of what people are talking. You still have to be civil, whether you agree with it or disagree with it. You still have to be civil to each other. So as much as I was a fan of Trump during his one term, and if he does get the nomination, he will get my vote again in 2024, hands down. But for him to not show up is like a 2-year-old throwing a temper tantrum because they didn't get their toy.
Who's got grandchildren here in this group here? Okay, let me ask you guys, the three of you. If your grandchild behaved the same way that Donald Trump behaves in public, would you be proud? Just about this behavior. You would not. Why not?
Because it's not showing that esprit de corps, that acceptance of the results, whether you like them or not, but not because you're going to take it lying down, but out of respect. The civility part of it doesn't mean that you agree with it.
Thank you all for being here. To preface my question, I'd just like to address exactly where we are. So we are in the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication, and I think it's important to bring up Mr. Cronkite's legacy when we're thinking about the state of our politics today, because Cronkite was known as the most trusted man in America, and as we can see now, everything has become completely polarized. It's like people on both sides, they're getting different facts. So it's like we're not even debating like the same facts set as opposed to when Mr. Cronkite was having his career. So my question is, do you think that there will be a time when our country can like let go of this polarization and come back together to become the United States of America as opposed to how divided we have become?
Mr. Secretary.
Well, I think everyone said that the polling up there, truth was number one. And really what it gets back to is the essential issue of character. And it really gets back to character of the individual, but then you also have to have a cause. And so I'll go back, and it dates me, but Reagan had a cause and he had character. When they come together, they cannot be separated. If you separate character from a cause, you'll end up with neither. But you pull them together, you'll have a great cause. And I'll tell you right now, where we are in America is both political parties are looking for that next great one, whoever that is. I haven't found them yet. If I do, I'll let you know who it is. If you do, give me a call. Because we're both looking at that on both sides of the aisle. But what we really need is character.
We have had one election in American history where 2 out of every 3 eligible voters voted, 2/3, 67% in 2020. Every other election, a majority of eligible voters only vote once every 4 years. It is hard to get a majority of it. So we talk a lot about extra votes and where they're all coming from. But in terms of the eligible voter population, we just had a really high midterm turnout, one of the highest we've ever seen, 46% turnout. Okay, 2020 was an anomaly. 2018 was the highest we've ever had in a midterm, 50%, just about 50%. That was unusual. So there is a vast, I think everyone has senses, I think we probably all agree, there's a lot of people who aren't being heard from, and they probably are not all monolithic in their political views. They probably have multiple political views, and they're not participating.
And so actually, there's some good news here. People are more interested and involved than we were decades ago. So that's a good thing. But what we have to do is harness this. And I do want to say one thing for the Arizona folks. Okay, again, for this conspiracy to have occurred that we've heard about, it literally would have taken hundreds, if not thousands of people. And remember what I said in the beginning. It's your neighbors, it's your family members who are running these elections. And finally, Kari Lake had a 2-day trial in Superior Court, got to put on evidence, got to put on witnesses, testified under oath. That failed. It's still going through the courts. Others have done that as well. So there are opportunities for people to come in with evidence, and it hasn't happened yet.
One last thing. I'm kind of a movie buff. One of my favorite movies is The Godfather. Does anyone remember how the movie starts? The very first scene of the movie. The very first scene of the movie is not the most famous line of the movie, I'll make him an offer he can't refuse. No, the very first line of the movie, it's a cold open on a face of the Undertaker. Amerigo Bonacera. What does he say? I believe in America. If we leave here tonight without one other thing being achieved, I want you to know I believe you believe in America. I hope you believe I believe in America. Let's keep this conversation going, and let's keep believing in this phenomenal experiment that we have called America, because I believe in it, and I believe you believe in it too.
And we're going to do something that's going to surprise you all. I'm going to ask you. I'm going to ask you. We're going to give you the last word. So you can never walk away from here saying that your voice wasn't heard and that people didn't care. So you blanched, so I'm going to go with you first. How do you want to close this?
I think it was a great discussion tonight, and obviously appreciate all of the guests. And what we need to realize is that there's a reason there's so much doubt. You know, we see it. We see it in the media. We especially see it in social media. And, you know, we say we're in the First Amendment Center or whatever this is called. But in today's world, does the First Amendment, freedom of speech, really exist anymore? And that's what a lot of us see. That's why a lot of us are frustrated. If you say something that they don't believe in, you get shut down. So that's where a lot of that frustration comes from, and I'll leave it at that.
And not here. None of you were shut down. Last word, but we got to get out, so be quick.
Well, first of all, I just want to thank everybody for coming out. This has been a fantastic experiment. Again, like I said before, we are all Americans. Whether you're Democrat, whether you're Republican, we're here together for the same cause, which is our country. And we need to know and understand that. It doesn't matter our age, our demographic, or the color of our skin. We are Americans, first and foremost. And we need to remember that, because people from other countries come here clamoring for what we have. I've seen it firsthand. I've lived in South Florida. I've had Cuban friends, and they come here for that. And I feel like sometimes we take it for granted and we want to throw it away for what other countries have. No, they come here for what we have, and we need to remember that.
That does it for today. We hope you've enjoyed this special on election integrity and what works in our democracy. You're streaming CBS News.